What's up guys? So in today's video what we're going to be working on is installing this roof rack on a 2021 Toyota CHR, and I also installed some kayak holders. This will be a two-part video just because the installing of the roof rack was a little bit longer than expected. So I'll do the install of the kayak holders on a separate video, which will be a part 2. But let's go ahead and get into unboxing and installing. Alright guys, let's go ahead and open up this first box. This will have everything for the roof rack. So let's go ahead and unbox everything, lay it all out, and then we'll talk about it. Alrighty, so now we have everything pulled out of the box. I have the left side and the right side, I assume, because it's RR and LL, so I assume that's the left side and the right side. So let's go ahead and unwrap this paper, or the bubble wrap, and let's lay everything out so we can see what we got to do. All right, so we have everything laid out now. Everything's unboxed, everything's opened up. So we have these little rubber gaskets, or these little pieces. And you can see that they have like little diagrams on them. So I'll kind of tell you where those pieces go. Let me get up close and focus on this so you can see it. We'll get there. Alrighty, so you see like a little car, then we'll say like this one's RR, and it's looks like on the back side on the right, so back right passenger side. So they're all labeled so you'll know exactly where they go. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and start assembling these bad boys. So as you see here, go a little lower. There's this like little swivel, and it has the threads. That's where you're gonna take this and this piece, you're gonna go through the hole and you have to connect it. But the only thing is that this will freely move. So if you try to push it in, it's gonna lay flat and you won't be able to thread it. So you have to have something pushing this down to keep it in line as you twist when you're simultaneously doing this. So I'm gonna use just like a little bar that I can fit behind here. Fit behind, hold it in place, and then I can use my other flat head because this will want to move back and forth as well. So you want to keep this centered also. So it's a bit of a pain in the butt, but let's go ahead and try it out, man. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and start with the front rack. So we're gonna open up the front door. I went ahead and took all the rubber pieces where the diagram says they go. I went ahead and I popped them in the proper spots. So the way that they sit, there's like a little hook, right? Let me focus the camera on it so you can see it better. This little hook is gonna grab it right where the weather trim is on the top of the car, the little gap. So let's go ahead and pop that back on there, and I'll show you exactly where the rack's gonna go. All right, so we're gonna pop it right here, and then let me get a little bit closer, but there's gonna be like a little pin here. Just let me grab the rack and I'll show you. So you're gonna open up that pin, and then on here, let me get a good angle. There's that little pin right there. It will go right in the hole of the little rubber piece that we're gonna remove. All right, so there's like this little piece right here, and what I'm gonna use is a little flathead. Stick it under there. All right, that's the piece I'm talking about. So now that that's removed, we can pop it onto the car. Alrighty, so I think this is going to be the best way to install it, a lot easier that way. So you want to put one side in entirely. So you want to put the nub in the little hole where that little trim piece that you pulled out, or the little nub that you pulled out. you're gonna wanna put that in and then install it. So one side on the other side is in. I went ahead and I took this piece completely off because it's gonna be much easier to put this, the nub is the hardest part. So what I was doing was trying to pull it and try to make it fit. But since there's a nub right there, I'm having to pull extremely hard and I don't wanna break anything. So I went ahead and I put one side in with a lot of slack. It's basically only has a couple turns of thread on the other side, so I have enough room to pull this to where I need it to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put the nub in on this side, and then I'm gonna go ahead and just re-put it back in the way it was. So now we're gonna take our little cover piece here, and we're gonna go ahead and apply that back onto here. You're gonna push it in. Once it's in place, you're gonna take this little plastic key thing they give you, and you're gonna do that quarter turn. Alright, so on the rear, or on the back roof rack, I went ahead and I just did a time lapse because it's same as the front side. You just rinse and repeat, pull out the little pins, you're going to install the same side, and then go ahead and have one side loose all the way, and then tighten it down. And then we'll go into the different problems that I ran into on the rear side. Alright guys, so I tightened it down all the way and it didn't really make much of a difference. So essentially what I'm talking about here is this little piece here is supposed to be grabbing the edge right up here, but it's not sitting far enough in the center. No matter how much I tighten, it's just not gonna lay flat. So this big gap right here where it's supposed to be catching it and grabbing it is just, you know, a big gap and it's not laying flat. And the only thing I can do is to make it lay flat is to trim off this little grabber here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take an X-Acto knife, make it nice and flush, and hopefully it will lay flat because for the most part it lays flat other than the big gap right here because it's supposed to be grabbing something, but since it's, you know, I don't know why, but it's just like, it doesn't fit 100% like a glove. It's just off ever so slightly. And it's mainly because of this one piece here. So let me trim this piece off and tighten it down and let me see if that makes a difference. Alrighty, so as you see here, I went ahead and I cut off the little lip that was right there that's supposed to grab the weather stripping on the top of the car. I realized that the gap is still fairly large with that trimmed down, so what I did was I just trimmed down even more of the rubber to try to make it lay as flat as possible, because that was the biggest cause of the gap, was mainly the big rubber piece that was lifting it off the car, allowing a big gap where you install it. So I went ahead and I just shaved it down as much as I could, or where I felt was necessary. So if you do get this this far on the install, keep in mind you might need an X-Acto knife to slice it down a little bit to make it fit properly. I wish it fit like a glove, but unfortunately it doesn't. So if you want to make it look as good as possible, you're gonna have to trim down some of this rubber. Alrighty, so now that I trimmed it up, you can definitely tell that the gap is much smaller. But now that it's much smaller, this little trim piece, or this cover panel, is now sitting a little bit lower, thus scraping against the door. So what we're gonna have to do is, this is kind of at an angle, so we're just gonna cut it ever so slightly on this corner and make sure that it's not gonna be catching on the door after we stick it on there and not move it. So let's trim up these pieces real quick. We're just gonna trim a little bit off to make sure that it matches this to where we're not gonna get it caught up on the door right here. Alrighty, so we just finished up with the trimming and trying to make it fit properly. So I had to trim the rubber down, and then I had to trim this piece down because now it's sitting flatter. So this piece was actually hanging over the door. So when I'd open the door, it was catching on that plastic trim. So I trimmed that down as well. Now the door opens and closes properly, and the gap is much smaller. So there is still a little bit of a gap, but I can't trim off anymore. And it's just, I think it's because this rack is just a little bit longer than it should be, and there's no way around the rack. You can't trim that down. So trim down the rubber enough to where that gap isn't as big as it was. So if you look at it from the side, it looks pretty good. Can't even tell really, but you have to get real close up behind it, and you can see that gap, you know. So not 100% flush, but better than it was, so I'm happy about that. So, but it took a lot of extra work on sanding it, cutting it, making it look good, you know. So the front looks amazing. The back is just a little bit sloppy, but better than it was. So I'm happy about that. Appreciate those of you that got this far in the video. I got a lot more videos to come for the car. So that's the rims, tail lights, different upgrades that we're going to be doing on the Toyota CHR. Also the part 2 video to this one, which will be the kayak holders, so I can show you guys how to install it, how to properly anchor them down, and what they look like whenever they're on the car themselves. Overall, the roof rack looks awesome. You know, it's just a bit of trimming here and there to make it look good, but overall I am happy with it. But if you're expecting it to fit like a glove, unfortunately that's not the case with this specific product, you know. But at least this video will help you out if you do want to get this rack and, you know, shave it down a little bit to make it look as good as possible. Appreciate you guys.